Welcome to the Chasing Thoughts podcast. Listen in as Mindy, Keith, and their guests take a deep dive into their own minds and souls to investigate the beauty of imperfection, challenge their beliefs, and embrace the richness of living a truly authentic life.
Hey everybody, this is Chasing Thoughts, and today Keith and I are doing an episode, just the two of us, and we're going to really let you in on our own thoughts and feelings as we went through this interesting experience. And so jump on board. Let's talk about it. Okay, so the episode that was supposed to air today, we're not going to air. And it's because Keith and I feel out of alignment with its message. And we really want to make sure that everything that comes through the Chasing Thoughts podcast is uplifting, inclusive, kind, and human-centered. So we're going to talk about what that experience was like for us, recording something that we didn't feel great about, and then how we came to this decision.
Beautiful.
So for me, during the episode, I recognized one of my sort of go-to ways of disconnecting. So oftentimes when I feel uncomfortable in a situation, or my thoughts are like, I don't like this, I don't agree with this, I don't like you, I don't want to be here, right? Like when I'm experiencing that on the inside, my immediate sort of go-to is mask, go into professional mode, ask your questions. And I'm not even in my body doing all those things. Sometimes if it's a really intense situation, I don't even remember like the rest of the meeting I ran or the rest of the, right, when I've been in situations like this. And I don't want to use that mechanism anymore. You know, I mean, it's served me in the past, certainly, but I want to be more authentic in the moment where I go like, hey, hold on, something's not lining up for me. Can we talk about it? Like that's courage to me.
Yes, that is. So I as you were thinking, I almost spaced out because it made me think of something. So I was a paratrooper, and then I was they call them correctional officer, but prison guard. I like that term better. For almost 9 years before my injury, but I hate confrontation. I liked fighting, but I hate confrontation. So it's easier for me to sit back and go into that people pleasing mode. And when I'm in that, I'm very susceptible.
Yes.
Like I when there was one time I was like 300 pounds at my biggest, and I was selling weight loss drugs or Herbalife
Yeah,
to people, like that were in shape already.
totally.
And because I'm so susceptible to that selling, like anytime anything goes, I have to run that by Sandy and be like, all right, am I, she's like, yup, just shut it off. It's not right. you
Yeah.
know, um, so I go right back into that, like you were saying that, and I didn't even realize that until like you were saying that, like I was falling right back into those old patterns, and it was something I don't want to be. I want to be assertive. I don't want to be a jackass,
Yep.
but I want to be able to stand up and say, wait a second, this is not what I believe in at all.
Yeah. And I think that this skill is difficult for every human, but I think it's particularly difficult for like introverted, sensitive, big-hearted people because of that confrontation. Like you genuinely don't want to make the other person feel bad. In fact, you want to lift them up, you want to make them feel great. And so that desire comes from like a really beautiful place, but then it gets in the way of you bringing your full self to the table. And that's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough to find that balance that's right for you and how to say it and the words to say it. And I think for me, what has worked in other areas of my life is just really leaning into like emotional intelligence skills, the words you use, the way that you put them together, because that makes such a big difference. Um, and so I think with this, I'm going to try to do that, right? Like
Mm.
practice. How am I going to say this in the moment if this happens to me again? Find the right words so that when it happens, I'm ready. I'm ready to show up in a different way.
And that's the beautiful thing. And I think one of the things that we try to get across on this podcast is that nobody has it all together. There is no such thing as having it all together. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, we need to have the up and down of our human emotions, which means at times we're going to feel things we don't want to feel. And those things are not wrong to feel. They're natural, you
Yep.
know? So, but yeah, 100%, you know, and I think the thing that helps me too is that remembering I don't want to like put like, you know, the evil villain type thing on somebody else, you know, because I believe that a lot of people's message is sincere
Mhm.
to their own perception.
Yes.
But the perception to me, and this is just from me, is not right. And it will only result in at some point more suffering down the line. When the perception runs off of there's an outside influence, there's an outside answer to all your problems, whether it's a product or money or you know especially money because that's one that it always goes down to like that is not your answer, you know. I had a friend once tell me like if you can't manage the $10 in your pocket now you're not going to be able to manage the 10 million that's in your pocket that you want, you know. And if you're not happy now with what you have, and also I'm going to start spinning here, also by happiness I don't mean like we were talking before that euphoric feeling. I mean, happiness is a byproduct of what we do. You know,
Yep.
it's not an end result. It's not the place that we're supposed to be like looking to live in consistently because I mean, anytime you hook someone's brain up to all those things, if you see a straight line, that's when you're in trouble. You know, you want to see the ups and downs. So we're going to have our peaks and valleys.
Mhm.
But what I think what we want to go for is that contentment,
Mhm.
you know, that peace. And that's what gives us happiness no matter what we're facing in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so beautifully said. You said so many things that I want to respond to. I took some notes. So, in the first part, you talked about how discomfort is not bad. And I loved that because I actually think that anytime we make a boundary, anytime we make a change, anytime we run into discomfort, you're supposed to feel uncomfortable and you're supposed to continue going with your boundary, with your, and there's so many of us that cannot stand discomfort that the minute we hit that wall, we shrink back.
Yes.
And that's why
Yes.
getting like building the ability to be comfortable being uncomfortable is a really great skill to build in life because then you can get through. I think that's what you're talking about at the end where you're talking about the peace. Like, I'm not identifying with this failure, right? I'm not this failure. I'm not this anxiety. I'm this experiencing all these things. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, because in the end, I mean, like with the general idea of what failure is, it wipes away the failure, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because it's something that we can learn, that we can grow from. So now we can take this thing that was unpleasant, you know, where we both kind of went back into those old patterns. We can say,
Yeah.
yes, number one, it's our responsibility. This is what happened.
Yep.
Number two, we don't have to shy away from it. We can say, look, to you know, to everybody that like all the life coaches out there, they're like, follow my course, you know, and you're gonna be better forever. Nope. You know, and then we can learn from that and make that part of our foundation so that we grow. And that's the purpose of all of this, growing together as human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that maybe we could talk a little bit about like just sort of ethical marketing and what we believe behind marketing. And I know you and I are very similar. When people come to us, we're trying to find out if it's a good match. We're working with them where they can afford us financially. Like, we're really invested in the process and the relationship of coach client, right? And so I think, I did a little video on it. I think you saw it, some of the things that I think
Yes.
sort of like
Oh,
warning
so
signs
beautiful.
in
Yeah.
marketing. And I wanted to say them on this podcast too for our listeners. So the first one was this calling out of a limiting belief. So if you're in a sales call with someone or you're interviewing a coach and they say something like, well, if you believed in yourself more, you would buy this package. That's just, it's inappropriate, right? Because they haven't had the time spent with you to know what your beliefs are, and they haven't had the time to build trust and get your permission to say something like that. And I think that is not only in sales, this happens to us in life, right? And um, it's okay to call it out and say, you don't know me well enough to say those things or make those judgments.
Yeah, there's a client of mine right now that I was working with, then we were done, and he had reached back out, but that was one of the things. So in the beginning I was like, okay, this is what we're going to focus on, but that was based off a 45-minute, to a 60-minute conversation.
Mm-hmm.
you know I'm not gonna be able to do the math right now with the medicine kicking, but whatever, 300 minutes later, I'm
Right.
like, no, ooh, I was wrong. We're gonna shift this. And that shift meant everything. Now, if my ego got in the way, like that shift never would have happened. But it's not
Yes.
about me,
Yes.
you know, and that's, I know we talked about it before. Like when I don't feel connected. I don't feel aligned with this idea of like, I want to help somebody. What I feel aligned with is I lived in this dark depression for so long. I don't want anybody else to suffer like that,
Yep.
especially a veteran,
Yeah.
and that's like one of the things when I'm told that offering my services for free to veterans is not right. Like,
Yeah.
well, you know what? The sort of deep sort of the lizard brain has some things that it wants to say, but luckily I did the work to stop that. But no, I mean it's about them. It's not
Yeah.
about me in any way,
Mm-mm.
including financially.
Yeah. And it's okay in this world to believe differently than other people, to, right? It's okay for some people to believe that that's the answer, and for some people not
Yeah.
to believe that a $10,000 course is not the answer, or charging like this, or doing business like this. We can all coexist in the space.
Yeah, I would love to have a course that I offered where people were paying me $10,000 to get it. That would be amazing. I would love to have that amount of money, but on the opposite side of that, I'm like, I'm putting a price on people being okay. I don't even want to say happy, but
Right.
okay.
But that at peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because what if somebody can't? So there are enough courses out there where people are charging 10,000. That's great. You got that. That's your ball court to be on. That's your playing field. I'm gonna be over here, and there's enough room on this field of life for all of us to play without getting in each other's way.
Yeah. And I think for you and I, we're more interested in sort of the sustainability of this, right?
Yes.
And so we're trying to build our businesses in a way where we'll be able to make the income we need without charging that much, whether that's grants, whether that's the membership programs where the membership can be really low, but there's all these free resources, whether that's like, of course, we need to feed our families and we want to be comfortable, but we want to do that in alignment with keeping everything that we do, or all of our courses, everything sustainable and reasonably priced. That's a good business model, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like people who are like, I'm selling, five $10,000 courses and it's all the same course and it's very like niched. I get that that's successful for some people, but in a way, I think it's sort of lazy business because you can make money fast and easy. And if you just take a little more time and build your business a little bit more sustainable, then you don't have to do it like that.
And that's the thing. Like I've been blessed enough where I have an income coming in through injuries and stuff that have happened, so at the moment I didn't see it as that, but I've been blessed enough where I have an income coming in where I can do this and not have to worry about paying my bills and feeding me and Sandy, and taking care
Yeah.
of family stuff. But our brain operates off of the pain versus pleasure principle. And in the same way, like we can harness that to manipulate
Yep.
like people as well. And when they when the marketing comes around to trying to scare somebody
Yep.
and then show them the pot of gold at the end of the scared rainbow that they just created,
Right.
like that's a dangerous thing. That's where I'll get pulled in,
Yep.
you know um and it's, to me, it's not right. It creates this mindset of scarcity. Like,
Yep.
why do I want all that money? Because I see all the things that it can buy. I mean, I was even watching a show, it can buy locations.
Yep.
And to me, that's disgusting that there's parts of the planet that we people can't afford to go and look at the view because we've been priced out of geographic locations.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And I just, you know what, even if I had that money, I would not put it into the hands like, and I'm not saying those are bad people that do that. And that's the crazy thing,
Right.
because when we start answering anger with anger, we're on the same coin. It's just the other side, and both sides have that self-righteousness about their anger. So it's letting go of that and accepting, like, unfortunately, that's just the way they see things. Like I have somebody that's close to me that in Connecticut, it's a higher cost of living, but in her mind, it's, if you're not making $250,000 a year, then you can't afford to live in Connecticut. And I'm like, damn, I'm homeless apparently. Like I'm not even making $100,000 a year.
And that's okay, and there's nothing wrong with you that you're not striving to make a ton of money. Like, that's the part
Yes.
where it gets really fucked up in our culture. And my husband and I have been down that road, like working two jobs, getting up at 4 a.m., working 12 hours a day, buying second houses, and it sucked a bag of assholes. Like, it was the worst.
A
So
whole bag. I
a
love
whole
that.
bag of them. So yeah, like this idea or this cultural pressure that you're a low life if you don't want to be making tons of money is disgusting, and we just need to do away with it. It's not true. There are like a whole culture of people who are living sustainable lives and not buying into this capitalism type of mindset, and that's a good thing.
Oh, it's such a good, I mean, so whenever they do any studies on hunter gatherers, that's the thing that they come up with. They work on average about 4 hours a day, and then the rest of the time they have to socializing, maintenance of the weapons, their possessions, stuff like that. And it's that time that creates such a great mental health, that they believe they had based off of the hunter gatherer tribes that they study today. And it's the same thing when we look back in history. When we stopped being hunter gatherers, we were able to put down what archaeologists called site furniture, right? So now it's this point we're sedentary. We're staying in the same place,
Yep.
right? Before that, everything that we owned, our shelters and everything, could be put on the back of a horse or carried off by ourselves. So, and we start to see this like in cities, like mainly like Egypt, right? And I'm sure you have it like in Mesoamerica and stuff like that. But you start to see, and then you start to see this break of jobs. So before, I mean, it was pretty self-explanatory. You were either a hunter or a gatherer. And just so people know, like, it wasn't the men were the hunters, the women, no. The women hunted as well.
Yeah.
The men gathered as well. The women, as they would go off gathering, would also hunt smaller game and stuff like that. So, but wow, I just threw that in my mind, just like took a left. I love this stuff. Like, this is so beautiful. um, the medicine. But yeah, so we start to see a break off of jobs where now you have artists that are creating the pottery, and decorating them. You bury the burial chambers, the people that are creating all the glyphs and cartoufs, I believe, right? Then we have the priest class. And we've evolved to this point where there's another breaking off, in my opinion, where people can stop living this. I'm going to, I'm going to wake up before everybody and go to bed before everybody and get Alzheimer's at 30 years old mentality, and have heart attack, like it's a good thing.
Yes.
To me, I go to bed at around 11. I wake up at 9, and I judge myself, you lazy piece of shit. You should be up at 4, and you should be up at 4 so you can like do an hour run, and then you meditate for 5 hours. I woke up at 9, I had some coffee, I read a book, and I did some mushrooms.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the next, like you said, sort of breaking or shift has to be about this, because AI, computers, people don't need to work. There's more than enough resources for everybody. But right now, our culture places so much value on what you do that it's going to be really hard to switch models, right? And go to a society where we're pursuing our hobbies. And like you and I, like, we have time to do this podcast, even though it's not making money. And we have time, right? And living at a healthier, like, standard, because you need time in your life to exercise, to meditate, and to be with the people you love. Because when you're with people you love in a non-doing, non-pressure state, you merge with them. Like, that's where love grows and connection happens. And if you're busy all the time, you're sacrificing the relationships in your life. You just are.
100%. Yeah.
And
There
that's
is
like
there is
one of
no
the most
other
basic stuff
relationship.
we get, like as humans, is our
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah, I even put up a couple of videos recently on relationships on TikTok, and like some people got mad like about putting the other person first.
Mm.
Um and one person, like I love this because she's always there commenting and even calling me out at times, which we all need. It's how we grow.
Yeah.
We can't be afraid of being wrong,
Yep.
but it was like, and she said like this is an unhealthy relationship, and I was talking to Sandy about that, and I'm like, I feel like this is the healthiest thing in my sin, and for me, it's much healthier than I am physically.
Yeah.
It's the best thing that I have, in this world is this relationship. But it's off the understanding that there is an emotional foundation that's right. And a
Mhm.
lot of times we try to do things for other people, whatever, and we just, but it's really about self.
Yes.
If I'm trying to give everything up to somebody else to control them so that I can get something in return, even if it means like stopping the emotional abuse, it's really about self,
Yes.
and in a way too, even the way putting somebody else's needs first and stuff, it's still about self because it makes you feel so much better.
Yeah.
And that's what this is all about. Like
Yeah.
our relationship, even though literally we are still strangers, amazes me.
I know. I know. This is kind of an aside, but you made me think of it. So a couple podcasts ago when we were recording with Chris, we talked a lot about getting off your phone. So I left my phone in the car and I went to Costco. And of course, my prescription was late. But instead, I started talking to this old cowboy who owns 700 acres and he hasn't seen as many animals this year. And it just reminded me again of like having a calm nervous system and being healthy. Not only do you have time for the ones close to you, but you get to interact with the world, right? I mean, when I think about who I was when I was working like that, I would like put in my headphones at Costco, like try to shut it because I was so overloaded. My nervous system
Yes.
wanted to like jump out of my skin. Humans should not be living that way. That's crazy.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was this thing that I for the longest time, and even just in point to you said that, like I finally feel like the question is answered. There's a book called The Open Focus Brain, and it talks about how like zebras, lions, so both predator and prey live in an open focus, and then it's those minutes of stress, the narrow focus, but our society pushes that narrow focus constant, and that narrow focus, what happens in the body is it restricts our blood vessels, right? So you're talking about higher blood pressure, heart disease, stuff like that. Like, I mean, all the autoimmune responses, right? It stops the digestion,
Yep.
because like if I'm running from a bear, I'm not going to stop and be like, I wonder how Dave is doing. Like I think I'm going to send him a letter, give him a call. Like no, I'm running from a bear. It's like I only care about myself and the bear. That's it.
Yes.
And if I am the one that's going after them, like if that is my means for survival, to take this thing down to feed my family, I'm not worried about. So you start having all kinds of autoimmune issues, gastrointestinal issues. That narrow focus will kill you.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to say on this topic is hard work is important, yes, to get to your goals, to do work, but you're never going to create peace and sustainability through hustle and stress.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
You're just not going to do it. It's kind of like you were saying earlier when somebody has the idea where they're like, oh, as soon as we get this cool car, we're going to go camping more. Or as soon as I get this new workout outfit, I'm going to work out more. This thinking, right, that when something happens, it's going to be different.
Yeah, it's not. It's
No.
not. You're going to take that same thinking because, and this was one of the things when I was going to the VA, they were doing cognitive behavioral therapy on me. That I would have to fill out this little worksheet. Like this thought was bad. This made me angry. This thought was bad. And then I would put the worksheet away, and then I would pull it out and bring it to my therapy session that week. But that thinking came up because I practiced that type of thinking constantly. Everything pissed me off.
Yeah.
So I realized I have to start practicing a new way of thinking constantly. And for me, that's what drove me to coaching,
Yeah.
because the coaching put a lot of emphasis on the action taken instead of on this sort of philosophy,
Yeah.
that's just out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be
Yeah.
action.
Yeah. And I would say it's action followed by curiosity, right? It's
Oh yeah, yes.
self-reflection. So you go like we did with this episode, like, why did we feel bad? Like, why wasn't that episode feeling in alignment with us? Okay, I think it was this for me, it was this for you. And we came to bigger and bigger truths about ourselves and where we wanted to go with the show. And that self-reflection piece again requires that you have time to journal, to sit in your garage, to sit on the porch. But that's the key to moving yourself forward in your life, is that action plus reflection, action plus
Right.
reflection.
And that addiction to that narrow focus,
Right.
because even as soon as you mentioned journal, like my like I'm still like I still am the type that loves to fight, but I hate the confrontation. You know what I mean? So I don't get it. But like I'm like, oh, I'm not a journaler. Like I've tried it, like it just
Yeah.
but like you said, so if I narrowly focus just on that, but if I open it up, and say, yeah, sitting in my garage, smoking some weed and just thinking,
Yep.
because that's what takes us out of that cycle of life, that revolving door,
Yep.
that we keep doing, having the same thoughts, which create the same actions, and we get the same outcome. And then we're like, I don't know,
Yep.
but it's so weird to me now, but I was stuck in it for
Oh yeah.
25 years, man. Like,
Yeah. And I think that's where like the authenticity and self-reflection has to be unique for every person, because what gets me into those theta brain waves when you're like crafting or you're painting or you're walking in the forest, that's different for everybody. And you're not going to know what yours is unless you go, okay, I'm going to try journaling for 30 days. Oh, nope, that sucked. Okay, I'm going to try walking every day. Okay, nope, that you have to sort of, like do a scientific method of finding what does that for you, right? Like for you, sitting in your garage is like your thing. It puts you in that space.
Yeah, that and like watching documentaries,
Oh
learning
yeah.
about and
Yeah.
not just document like I got an email from Netflix. There's a new show you might like, a documentary on music. I'm like, no, I got nothing with music. Does not interest me at all, But again, it's from my upbringing,
Yeah.
where music was bad. It was Satan's way to manipulate kids'
Into your
minds to,
mind.
yeah, into becoming gay. I love like the old beliefs that I used to have, especially like on this medicine. Like I saw a thing where a guy went to the Connecticut legislature when they were looking at uh, psilocybin as a medicine, and he said it allowed me to forgive myself, and I'm like,
Okay.
yes, I lose, or no, I'm sorry. He said I lost all judgment of myself, and that's one of the beautiful things. Like all this stuff that I judge myself for, I lose on this medicine. So I laugh and like, yeah. And then I learned from it, and anybody else can learn from it. We want this plastic, like Barbie's like a big thing, like for me, it'd be the Ken, like this plastic shape. No, dude, like I mean, we're humans. Like the moon was formed from a chunk that was pulled off the planet and then bombarded, like so there's all these craters, which makes it mesmerizing when you look through it in a telescope, but that's who we are. We've
Yeah.
been taught to think though that we're this plastic facade,
Yeah.
and we're not. There's beauty in my craters.
Yeah.
that
Totally. Totally.
that sounded better in my mind than actually came out, but
Yeah. I wanted to add something to your piece about, when you reflect on your past very religious beliefs, because I do the same thing. Like I can remember being a young woman and actually arguing with somebody that women should never hold positions of leadership, that women, that the world would be screwed over if a woman ever became president, that, right? Like I had these very sideways beliefs. And you know what I think? Thank God there were people who didn't judge me enough to like tell me a different story. And I'm like, every day I'm just like, thank you. Think like how important it is to be kind to people who don't believe like us, because that's how they get exposed to something else. And I'm so grateful. It would have been really easy for people to be turned off by me and what I was saying and to just dismiss me as being ignorant. And I'm so grateful that that wasn't my story. And so when you said that, I was like, yes, let's talk about how important it is to be kind and slowly show other people other points of view.
it's funny when you brought that up, it made me remember. So when I was in my late 20s, I used to take American Kempo, and I still to this day love American Kempo. But the guy that taught me, we are like that. We're like oil and water now, you know. But he said, but we can still learn messages from those, and still learn a lot from those that we don't agree with.
Yep.
Where he said, he'll never give somebody the answer, because when you find your answer, that's when it becomes like a foundation, in
Yes.
someone's life. I was thinking about this last night. Like I went to bed just kind of, I like to let my imagination go. And I was thinking about the verse in the Bible that talks about faith, right? So Hebrews, I think it's 11:1, right? Faith is the substance of things hoped for. So in that instance, faith, like hope is this, I don't know the word. Is it the word like ethereal? Like it's just kind of
Right.
out
Yeah.
there. Okay. So faith, like hope is this kind of the ethereal thing, but it's faith gives it substance, which gives it mass. Makes it matter. So now it's something tangible that I can hold. Like if it didn't have mass, there's nothing for me to hold on to, but faith
Right.
is what gives it that. And then the verse goes on to say, it's the substance of things hoped for, and it's the evidence of things not seen.
Yeah.
So, something that's not like if there's ghosts or whatever, like whatever you believe, but you know what I mean? But like, this is the evidence. It's the breadcrumb trail that we're following.
Mm.
And that's the beauty about faith, you know, about like all this stuff. I'm sorry, my mind like went so deep into that, I forgot where we were coming from.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's on par. If not, sorry.
Yeah, I think you started with, talking about, sort of self-trust, because I remember it triggered a
Yes.
thought of mine that was like, that's another sales thing that I think people need to be aware of, is any attitude from someone trying to sell you something that they're smarter than you, or that you should trust them more than you, especially in a life coaching sale. That is a huge red flag. And I think that all life coaches should be making sure their clients pause and consider and don't say yes to things right away, whether that's financial, whether that's overcommitting in your life, whatever it is, because that harnesses wisdom. When you pause and say, is this a yes or no for me? What's happening? That's wisdom. And any life coach who's having an introductory session and telling you to decide right this minute, that's just a red flag. Like, I'm
Yeah.
trying to be soft about it, but I obviously feel strongly about it.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
okay
And
for people to
and
do
that
that.
to me, that's where that like where I call myself the stoner spirit life coach, that's where that comes in. Like whatever you're facing, you already have it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna offer you nothing. You know, hopefully, like if you think about things and reframe things and stuff, and you do that work, now it becomes something,
yeah,
you know. But like, I mean, man, you have artists that are making millions of dollars, you know, doing stuff. I mean, how many movie stars are out there that are making so much money? And I'm looking at those movies and be like, all right, nobody's wearing a cape, nothing's blowing up. So to me, this is trash, you know. But there's enough for the world that sees the beauty in that, you know. So, and that's what I want. I
yeah,
want my clients to get, or I want people, you know, as like to get their answers,
yeah,
to find their path.
yeah.
And if that means it's not found with me, then by all means,
Yes. Go
like,
to
please,
another
I
life
will
coach,
help
find
you.
someone. Yeah. I love
Yes.
my people who come to me find a good match for them too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that's
But
what
but it,
it's about.
and to me, what that says like about you is like you're pushing them first, but you have to be so okay with who you are in order to do
Yes.
that,
Yes.
you know. And then for me and my Christian, my old the old Christian thing, like, oh, that's pride, you know, like that's because that's the way Satan makes you gay. So like,
Yeah. Yeah. I think, how much I love Tad Hargrove, Marketing for Hippies.
yeah,
What
yeah, he's
he
amazing.
says is that if you're coming into a sales conversation, or if you're on the other side as the buyer, the answer yes or no needs to be equally okay. I'm not trying to convince you of anything, right? If you feel good about this, let's work together. And if you don't, let me help you find something else, right? Like, I don't want to work with someone who, I don't want to convince somebody to work with me and then always question their experience, or, right? It's in my best interest to only take clients and to not high pressure clients.
Yeah, I'm not gonna scare anybody into making a decision,
Yeah.
especially when that decision is like, give me money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Cause yeah. Yeah. I'm totally with you. Um, I think trying to think, look at my notes and see if there was anything else I wanted to say about marketing, just so people, can be aware of these things. Big packages that you don't feel comfortable with, that's kind of a red flag. Like, if someone doesn't have like introductory offers or free things you can download, or a path to them, I think that that's a red flag. Yeah, I think, oh, the other thing is playing on your abundance mindset to kind of
Mm.
make you say like, well, you could afford more money if you really had an abundance mindset.
Yeah, like there's like this thing that I've heard a lot of people use, like Tony Robbins said, like if I told you you have to lose 20 pounds by tomorrow and I'll give you $10 million, you'll find a way to do it, even if it's cutting off a limb. And I think that works better in thought than it does like in actuality. Like I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't go through that, for $10 million, And so, yeah. And I remember seeing like, especially like with my Google searches, like, and how everything listens to us nowadays. So you open up social media and then I'm flooded, back in my days when I was still dark, talking about depression, talking about anxiety so much, since it was the only focus I had in life. And I was flooded with all of these courses, and then I'd be like, wow, this person, like, yes, this is all the stuff, that I'm feeling. So they're hitting all my fears.
Yeah.
And then they're showing me like, this is what I can get, so they hit all the pain points, they're hitting all the pleasure points. And then
Yep.
I look at, and it's like $10,000 or even $5,000. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, like I can't afford to get better. And that's why I got into this,
Yeah.
so that other people can see me as a way to not feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, of course, there's coaching companies that need to have bigger price tags because they have employees and they're doing big. Of course, that's the scale of some business, and that's great. And they're helping people at a different level. But I think that it, every single person who's in the helping profession needs to really uh, acknowledge what percentage of income they're making off the people and off their company and what their take home is, and see if it's ethical and if it's in alignment with the kind of world they want to live in.
Yeah.
Because
I live my
I
life.
don't want to live in a world where 1% of the people have all the wealth. So I'm not going to behave in such a way that supports that sort of mindset of really, really rich off the backs of people, like more than you need to make, right?
Yes.
That philosophy.
Yeah. And then we've been so conditioned to think, oh, that means socialism, or that means communism. No. Look, take like, you can have all the money, and you can
Yeah.
have all of life's pleasures
Mm-hmm.
without having $1 trillion, and even one of the most beloved shows on television, Star Trek, is based off of that,
Yes. Yeah.
like where
Yeah.
Seth MacFarlane in the offshoot, the Orville, like they talk about that, like people, there's this standard of living that everybody gets, and so now it's what people do with themselves, and which means it's who we are.
Yep.
I'm curious, so I'm going to go into Starfleet and explore.
Yes.
Other people are like, no, I'm a grower, I'm a farm, so they're going to
Yep.
stay there. But they have that foundation, and yeah, I'm not going to, the cost, which the true cost comes when life is not actualized.
Yeah.
When somebody makes a decision, and I saw that with Sandy, with what she went through, that's where the cost comes in, the true cost. That's where the made up hustle and all this stuff that we should be living just disintegrates. And you
Yeah.
see where the true cost is. And it should not cost somebody. Life should not be priced out of and we talk about this with rent,
Yep.
groceries. And it's a thing these days, but
Yep.
life should not be out of somebody's reach financially.
Yeah. As a collective, there are more than enough resources for us to give everybody a house and food, basic standard of living, and still have people make $1 million, like be millionaires. Like there's enough for all of that to happen. We just have to change some of the laws and the way we do things, right? And we have to be okay. I guess we have to move into a caretaker and like collaboration and cooperation with our fellow human beings and see them as people, right? I mean, it's crazy to me when I, encounter the homeless situation or something, and people are like, oh, you can't give them homes first. I'm like, who are you to think that that's okay to say that a person doesn't believe a home? That's crazy. Like, that's crazy. You give animals home, you feel bad about the stray dogs on your street. we
And
should.
that's it all. Yeah. And it all comes from somebody with another agenda
Yep.
creating a fear, using that fear to generate like that belief system. Because if we go back again, there's two things that ensured our survival. In fact, there's two things. I wouldn't even say ensured our survival as a species, but there's two things that put us at the apex of the planet today. Because when we were the majority of human history, we were a prey species.
Yeah.
We were food. We were the squirrels. Like, there's nothing special about us. We were the vermin, the rodents. But negativity, always looking out for which every species below us has. That's why they call that the reptilian brain.
Yep.
But then cooperation.
Yep.
The hearth. When you look back in the archaeological record, it's the hearth. When you start seeing these group hearths where like everybody was around cooperating, that's where bands of hunter-gatherers that are about like 10 to 20 people begin to grow. And then you start to see cities formed.
Yeah.
And you have all these amazing examples all over the world. I just watched this one, Lost Cities Revealed with Albert Lynn. Is such a great show. Like, the only thing I knew of the Cush, the people of the Cushites, was from the Bible.
Yeah.
Which meant that they were bad, and like, so I had to go through the Bible, like, line of thought with that. But they had an empire. They conquered Egypt for 100 years, and then even after that, they still ruled in the Sudan for like a millennium. And this city like came out, like, so it's cooperation, but people use that sense to go to the negative and to other everybody.
Yep.
And once you create an other, now you can start looking at them as less than human,
Yes.
as not worthy enough, as something I need to defend against.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe, and this goes into something with our podcast. So I believe that what I call the old world, which is what we're talking about, like the one that rich white men made, that has like capitalist culture, right? That puts down people who aren't the same as them. And then there's what I hope is the new world, which is like collaboration, cooperation, huge AI computer. No, people don't have to work, like more utopian, another renaissance, right? There's more art, there's more discoveries. Now, if I want that to happen, and that's like the reality that I want to support creating in the future, any guest that we have on our podcast needs to be talking about that and believing in that. Not this old world and the way that we've done things up till now, because that doesn't work.
Yeah, I've tried to get into the hustle culture, tried to be like, well, that's the way everybody, but I'm tired of always, because I've always felt out,
Yeah.
because my thinking has always been different.
Yeah.
And I mean, in church, that like, because I remember, like, when I see videos of like kid preachers, like, it just turns my stomach, because that's what I would do. And I would go and say the cliche thing so that everybody like in the church, like, be like, that's right, that's right, And it was always anger. It was always something around anger. But yeah, that's what it has. That to me is the next evolution. It's this emotional evolution that's going to happen. And it comes with acceptance.
Yep.
We have to create, we're in this beauty, like one of the things you talked about is like focusing on the good in the world. Like, everywhere you turn, there's bad, but you know what? There's so much beauty, and there's so much good, and there's miracles that are happening every day.
Yeah. And I will say that I also wonder if the news machine tells us all the bad and none of the good to continue to control us and keep us where we feel that we need to just be consumers.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
Was it Jeff Bezos that owns like Washington Post?
yeah, the truth is that there might be just as much good in the world right now as there is bad. There might be more but we don't know it because how are we making that judgment? Who are we relying on to provide us with that information? To me, that does seems kind of faulty to put my trust in what I know is all for-profit news.
Yeah. What, and
Concerning.
especially when you have to like, because I've done this before, like, you know what, I'm stepping away from the news and everything. And there's almost like this addictive type of thing, like where I'm like, all right, no, I got to go back. I got to go back.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's the thought, because even people will say, well, how do you know what's going on if you don't look at the news? I saw a video once where a guy was like, I don't think we're supposed to know.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
saw one where somebody said something similar, like, I think only God can handle seeing all the pains at the same time in every corner of the world. Like humans were
yeah.
not built for that.
I mean, I think I even sent you a video, like this guy that I follow, who's a hiker, and he's an overweight hiker. The amount of hatred that comes to him, but then even like he still has his struggles and his fights that he feels hopeless with his family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a sad thing, you know, but and then everywhere you turn, you see that everywhere, you know, and then like to me, like one of the biggest revelations of how that is being used to control us is, you know, when the comedy shows do a montage of all the local anchors saying the exact same thing, you know, verbatim, you
Yeah.
know, so that's coming from that's a script that they're reading from. So yeah, we're all being told to believe the same things, and it all goes into fear and scarcity because that's what sells.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking that that might be a fun thing to add into the podcast because I know, you and I are new to the podcast game. We're still figuring it out. And what I wanted to say is that I love the way we're figuring it out because instead of trying
Yeah.
to figure it all out and know it and then start it, we're like, let's start it and then let's be in like real direct communication. And so we can mold it and change it quickly as we develop. And it's just such a great way to tackle change in life, I think. So I wanted to mention it to anybody who's listening because a lot of times you just have to start and do it wrong and go left and then go right. That's the process of getting something started. So I think we've been doing such a great job with that. But I was thinking it might be nice to add some structure to our podcast so that, we check in and then maybe one of us brings a positive news story of something really cool that happened or maybe we bring like a cool, space story or archaeology story or something. And because I know you and I love to nerd out and learn more things, which means our listeners probably love to nerd out too, right? So adding
Yeah.
that as part of our podcast, I think could be really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Who is it during COVID, during the lockdown era, like John Krasinski and his wife
Oh yeah,
started that.
he's so amazing.
But you know what, like the thing to me, which I love that, you know, every time like an episode was released, I was watching it and I loved how like normal people got involved, you know, and but then I think it was NBC that bought it. And it
Oh,
was supposed to become something. That's why it stopped. Like
oh,
some studio bought it, as far as I know.
yeah.
Um, and it was supposed to become something, but nothing happened of it, you know, because I mean, even like positivity, like in psychology, like that's toxic positivity. Yes, I get that, but I mean, shouldn't we be like talking to people about you know our when our focus is on such bad things, we feel bad way when that's where focus goes, energy flow, you know. So if we can change our focus, not again, we have to like counteract all these things, not denying what we feel,
Yes.
not invalidating our feelings,
Yep.
being true to ourselves, you
Yeah.
know, not diminishing our own selves, you know, from somebody else, but having that strong foundation of self, of who we are, and liking and loving ourselves and caring for ourselves, you know. But positivity is what I think what's going to drive that evolutionary change, you know, and it's something that's going to be fought against.
Yes. Yes. Because, sort of that misery loves company type of philosophy, like there is a certain pull to sort of depression and complaining and being upset and right. And when a client comes to me and they're deep in those states, it's effort to get to a state where you're like, okay, I'm going to take responsibility for my life. Okay, well, now I'm going to start thinking positively. That's, you have to learn some new skills in that. And those skills pay off. You experience more peace, more joy, more happiness. So I think that's like the work you and I do is in honor of this like vision of the world that we want, because we can teach people that stuff. We can teach them how to self-investigate, how to think more positively, not only because you and I both have life coach training, but because we've fucking done it. Like both of us started
Yes.
in like shit places with shit mindsets. So
Yeah.
we have actually done and are doing the work right now. Right. It's not like
Yeah.
when you become a coach, you're like, oh my gosh, now I don't struggle with any thoughts at all.
And that's the thing too. Yeah. 'Cause Sandy went to school to be a social worker, and she left, I think, after a month, because people use what they've gone through as a platform instead of working on themselves. They're like, I'm gonna change you,
Yep.
but and like you said, though, we've done the work to change ourselves first.
Yeah.
And how much does that like imposter syndrome still go through? Because I know for me, it like kicks my ass on a daily basis, you know,
Yeah.
but to me, like, and it's not pride to say that's what separates us.
Yeah.
Like we did the internal work first. And I think that's what allows us to say, hey, look, if paying $10,000 or finding another way, whether it's another coach, a therapist, or taking hikes on a daily basis, I'm going to help you pave your path.
Yeah.
And that's what's beautiful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, with that imposter syndrome, about 2 years ago when I knew I wanted to, my son was leaving the house, I wanted to pick up coaching again. I went to therapy, and that was one of my goals. Like, I want to get rid of this imposter syndrome thinking. It's limiting me, help me like dig into myself and investigate like what's really happening for me here. Why can't I let go of this? And he did. Like, that's why we have helper professions in our lives, is so that when we come up against something, we hire a coach or a therapist and we have somebody help us work our brains out, because now that is so much less for me. And that's because of the work I did with my Gary. I call him Gary, right? My
Yeah.
therapist.
Mike,
Great.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah, because he helped me. Like, mine was locked up in like weird thoughts of you have to have a certain education, you have to go to college this many years, you have to have these kinds of parents who also went to college. And right, so I felt like I couldn't own who I was and what I know because of those things. And I think everybody's things behind their imposter syndrome are different. That's why you have to do the work to investigate what's going on back there.
Yeah. And to me, that was the gift of that episode that we're not going to air.
Yep.
So being called out that I don't believe in my coaching as much as I should, right? So over time, and with the help of this beautiful medicine, this is what I came to. That is true,
Yep.
but not in the way that it was said, So like my internal plumbing, I've been like working on that. That's part of it, where I can let the turd, float
Yes.
by. But I can still say, well, this is fiber and this is good, But we have to get dirty to do that. We have to literally break apart shit in our lives to see what's good for us. So I allow the stigma of, I'm trying to say this, but I don't know. Maybe it's the assertive part of me, like, just no, they're jackasses. The jackass coaches that are out there. I even heard one person say, like, let's face it, money buys happiness. And as far as I know, they have a lot of money, but they're not happy, Um, and I allowed that to dim the light that I found in coaching. And so when I separate that shit, I'm like, you know what? That's true. And I'm grateful
Yeah.
that someone called me out on that. And now I'm like, no, I am a life coach and I
Yeah.
believe in coaching and I believe what it can do. But that doesn't mean like I'm this savior of this, like coaching is not a messiah that is out there to lead everybody to the promised land. It is just one path of many.
Mm. Yeah.
And for me, it worked. And that's why I love it. And that's why I'm going to try to shine as brightly as I possibly can with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to repeat what you said because I think it's so valuable. When people give us feedback, we get to choose what am I going to do with this, right? And if you, this is again going back to, you have to have time and space and a calm nervous system and all the other things, not be rushing through life to be able to go, is this true? Is this not true? What parts of it are true, right? Most of us go through life and people give us feedback and we just take it. We just, right, put it on us. Oh yeah, I'm stupid, I'm unintelligent, I'm this, I'm that, whatever people say. And we don't take the time to vet it and see, is this feedback even worth taking? Do I admire who this person is, right? How well do they know me? That is the process of how you need to accept feedback in your life. And I think that's one of the skills that I teach a lot of clients, is building that buffer so you decide who you are. And like in this case, you looked at it and you doubled down on who you are. What a gift that she gave you, right?
Yeah.
Or like, that's the gift of when people provide us with difficulty, when we rub against something, we get to decide, wait, am I doubling down on who I am or am I changing myself? What's happening here?
Yeah. And I mean, that was one of, like, I have not had more mental health issues besides the PTSD from the military. I've not had more anxiety and panic attacks than when I started this business. And because I'm in a war with myself.
Yeah.
Like the ego and my true state of consciousness, my true state of being is at a
Yep.
war constantly, and even those words, at a war, they're fighting. That makes me want to destroy the ego. But no, what the ego is doing is trying to protect me.
Yeah.
So then sitting back and being like, thank you. Like, I'm so grateful for this part of me
Yeah.
that's trying to do that, and we say it in that language, but like before, when people, like, I remember there was a guy, Jack Cornfield,
Oh yeah.
I believe that's his name. But I had heard this and I was driving home from work. I'm like, it's so stupid. I'm not even talking to a side of myself and being like, oh, thank you so much. Like, I'm a bitch. I like, stop being a bitch. That's what I got to hear, and no, it really is like,
Yeah.
I mean, and there's so much that's out there that is just so, like, I just found this girl on Instagram. She's got to be like 12 or 13, and she's like Steve Irwin. She's like if anybody was like reincarnated, like, it's, I think her thing is Brooke Wild official or whatever. And she's lucky enough to be out, like, where on safaris, I'm imagining, like, from what it looks like, where they're doing checkups on these animals. Like, she just had a cheetah asleep in her lap while people were working on it, and then she takes a few minutes to talk about the beauty of these animals. And this kid is more courageous than I'll ever be. She was laying on this like 30-foot long, beautiful python. And I'm like, even though that thing's beautiful, like, I wanted nothing near me. Playing with spiders the size of my hand. And I'm like, dude. And she's amazed by that. Like, so there is so much beauty that's out there, and it's all going to depend on the focus that we have. And we have to have that filter so that we can pull, because everybody that wants to control us and move us, like, it's going to be wrapped in shit, but there's still a lot of great stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think this has been a good episode. I'm glad that we got to share with people sort of like what our feelings were and what we learned from this. And it was good investigation.
Yeah. And I know, like part of my head is like, I hope I stayed on point, because I know, like, I stay so present in the moment that I'll forget like what we were just talking about. But this, to me, this medicine like helps with that as I build the strength to do it. where I don't need it as much. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more concrete about kind of our branding, but I don't know if that's boring for listeners or good for listeners. So I was like, should we stop the recording or not? Because in a way, I think that it's quite possible that our listeners are also people who want to do podcasts, and witnessing us sort of working through our stuff could be valuable. And then on the other hand, it could just be boring. So
Oh
what
yeah,
do
I know,
you
like when I
stop
was going through my
record, or do you
classes.
want to?
Yeah, and when it was going through my classes, like they would have points, like they would call them power sessions, like where there was like an hour of learning, and then okay, if you want to jump
Right.
off. But we're gonna start talking, we're gonna start practicing this. Maybe we could do the same thing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's actually, I'll just pause the recording, or we can edit it out. I'm going to fill up my water, and then let's come back in 5 minutes and we'll talk about business. Does that work?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to. Okay, Chasing Thoughts listeners, this next section is going to be Keith and I brainstorming branding and having a branding conversation regarding our podcast. If you're have something that you're trying to brand in your life, it could be useful to kind of right along the exploration. So first, we are going to work on defining who our Chasing Thoughts listener is. So I said introverts, nerds, veterans, people who struggle with PTSD, anxiety, neurodivergence, ADHD, autism, recovering Christians, big thinkers, overthinkers, info hounds, philosophers, supporters of plant medicines, people trying to find a way to live life on their own terms, all genders, over 18. Like, is there anything you want to add to that? That's kind of how I saw.
Yeah, and that, as we were talking about before we started the entire pod, like this was so perfect to me, that I'm just like, yes, like this hits everybody,
So
you
I think
know.
when we because we have to sort of change our onboarding process and decide, like, do people need to answer a series of questions, or do we need to have a 5-minute conversation with someone before we hit record? Like this Friday, we have a new guest. Do we need to have a little conversation to make sure it's a good fit, since we didn't do any sort of survey or onboarding process previously? Because we can institute one. But that's something to kind of think about while we talk about these things, is how do we want to handle it going forward so that resonates with us and it's a good fit for our audience.
Yeah, because I was actually thinking about that too with sorry, like I'm noticing a difference between like my podcast mind and like
Yeah,
this
I
mind.
know, brain. That's why I was like, do we want to do this right now? Or
Yeah. But yeah, it's like fascinating to me. But I was thinking about the guests that we already have booked.
yeah,
Like, especially the one for like this Friday. So do we just say, okay, we cast a wide net, we'll take the, whatever comes in, and then from that point out, so, or do we start as of now?
yeah, yeah. And just so our listeners know, Keith and I put our podcast up like open to guests on like January 1st. And I think it was like January 13th, we were like booked through May. So the response that we got to people for wanting to be a guest on the show was way greater than we thought. And so I think we thought that we'd have some time to like massage out some of these questions. And now we're doing it on fast mode.
Yeah, like, yeah, because I thought there was gonna be like a guest, and then there'll be a couple weeks,
Right.
and then maybe another one, and I'm just like, geez, it's like a flood, like the dam burst.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things I'd like to change after the people that we already have scheduled is, I really loved what Chris Bean and his podcast is, the Prestigious Initiative. They meet with the guest, and then the next episode is just the two of them talking about what they learned from that guest and like integrating the conversation.
Yeah,
I want to do
'cause
that. That feels real for us and for
yeah,
me.
because I think like Pat Cooper,
Yeah.
almost like he was such a cool dude, so down to earth,
Yeah.
like gets lost, like in the weekly regimented schedule.
Yeah. So this gives us a chance for our own learning, right? Because we're going to talk more about what we learned from the guest. And it gives the guest more time to shine and their knowledge, right, to reach whoever's out there listening.
All right, so let me ask you this. So do we do that now, or do we say, do we like cut off? Like, so we're booked out till May and
Yeah.
then use the second half of the year kind of to like go back over.
Yeah, I don't know yet. I think what I want to do is change it because I'm so much more attracted to the every other slow digestion of conversation.
Yeah.
Except for I acknowledge that is a lot of work. It means contacting all those people, rescheduling them out. And so I think I'm still wrestling with that a little bit. So I'd say let's decide on that by the end of the week because
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure which way I want to go with that and how I feel. One thing I do want to do immediately is I'd like our conversations to slow down a little bit. And I recognize that when I get nervous, I talk faster. Or when I get excited or passionate, I talk faster and louder. Right. But I like slow conversations. And so I'd like to say to our guests before we hit record, hey, I'm really working on pausing and counting to 10 between when someone says something to me and before I respond. So don't feel like you need to fill silent spaces during our recording today, because we're actually trying to put in some more silent spaces into our podcast.
Yeah. And that's, I think yeah, because like I never know. I believe you have an incredible talent with interviewing, which is like comes naturally to you, but I never know when to say something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, to me, like I'm definitely like the Ed McMahon and you're like the Johnny Carson. Even though that's like aging me completely, but which I'm completely cool with, but like I never know when I should say something, when it's going to disrupt your flow or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think it's the same for our guests. So I think if we talk about it with the guest beforehand and say, hey, we really recognize that when I'm listening to you, I don't want to be thinking of my response. I really want to be listening to you. But that means then I need a couple seconds to think about my response, right? And that's actually us sort of modeling a good way to live, where you take that time and space and you're really more grounded and centered in what you're saying, and you're really offering more active listening to someone. So I'd like to try that, but I'd like to talk to the person beforehand because it could make them feel really nervous, like it does
Yeah,
me when there's like silence, right?
yeah, that definitely. Yeah, because I was just thinking like all our editing tools are designed to like cut those pauses out. And I get like people don't want to listen to the silence, but I think in the reality of it, it's very important.
Yeah, so let's just play around with how it feels if we slow it down a little bit intentionally, especially me, right? The other thing I thought of is like, I love using these little reactions, like raising your hand type of thing on here, or like putting a thumb up. Like, I think they're really useful in meetings. So we could kind of just tell people, okay, if you have something to say, or if you're really excited about something, feel free to use the reaction and we'll give you the floor next. But we could use tools to make that a little bit easier.
Yeah, see, I didn't even know that existed. Is that recorded? Does that come out on the recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
That way, if someone says something, you're like, oh, yeah, you could just be like, I'm next, right? Like,
I
and
love that.
yeah.
Where do you find that?
So go to the bottom where it says show captions.
Yeah.
No, it says reactions, and then click on reactions, and it gives you like,
Oh, ooh, I just learned
like
something
you can
new.
raise your hand, or you can just put some kind of interactive, like, oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
but we could
Oh yeah,
try.
because I'm looking for it like on the screen I'm watching you, but it's not there, but it's like on the screen that that's like the recording.
Yeah.
Ah, that's pretty cool. All right, wait, let me lower my hand. All right, cool.
But that could be a way that we because I think it's okay for us to talk about how, we're both neurodivergent. We have all these crazy ideas, and I'm assuming our guests are going to be that way too. We jump from one topic to another and we get passionate. So if you really want to say something, then we can raise hands.
Yeah, and especially like with what we want to be about, like instead of forcing people into a certain way of thinking, like being accepting of the way like people's brains work, like that is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've told you this, but my husband and I have a thing we do where we go like this, and it means, oh my God, I totally get what you're saying. Like, yes, yes, yes. So you don't have to interrupt the person, but you can like share and like, I'm getting you.
Yeah, dude. So that's so because like that's like clapping in American Sign Language.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So Sandy one day a deaf woman we were still going to church had come in and there was no interpreter, but Sandy knew how to spell. So fast forward like a year later, Sandy's like fluent in ASL because her and this lady became good friends, and the lady like taught her, and she was now interpreting at the church. Um, yeah, so yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so thinking about what is the chasing thoughts listener want to hear about and what do we want to hear about? I think I'd like to like go through some topics, and then maybe you and I can, after we figure out what we're going to do with the episodes, maybe think about in the future we go out and find people to be guests that are into philosophy, that are into plant medicine, like make our invitations really specific. So I love philosophy. I think you do too. That's a subject that
Yeah.
I'm really into futurism. I think it's so
Oh
cool.
yeah.
And at the same way, history and archaeology and the universe, like we're both really interested in those kinds of things. So having people on that also like to nerd out about that and can help
Yeah.
us would be really cool. Of course, how to live a better life, right? Because that's the whole like life coaching thing. But I think even when we're discussing those other big nerd out topics, that's going to be weaved into it because that's who we are, right? We're both seekers. We love personal development.
Right, right. Yeah, and to me, like that was the thing. Like, I don't want there to be a difference between who I am and what my business is,
Yeah.
because like we were saying before, I think we're just at this place where we can begin to branch off and make an income where that we can, survive off of, like in many different ways. So I think the same thing applies to this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think because we're both into plant medicine, that's something that we could add in where maybe we keep our listeners like up to date with what laws are changing about plant medicine and like where they can get plant medicine treatments, and do a little research on our own to provide that service to the people who are listening who might be in a space where they want to do that.
Yeah, especially with like media, um with like just thinking about like the passing of Matthew Perry, which
Yeah.
like I loved it. Even when I found out that he dealt with addiction, I was like, dude, everybody that I associate with like on TV, because I was that am that person, always making jokes and stuff like that. But they're putting everything on the ketamine, and I don't know enough to talk about this, but there was a lot of other stuff that, and in fact, it was stuff to help with his addiction, like the synthetic opiates and stuff, which I'm like, all right, what was really, the cause? But again, like I'm not a doctor, so I can just speculate from my own perspective.
But again, our news or fear culture grabs those kinds of things and says, even though 1,000 people have done ketamine safely, one hasn't, or 10,000 people, right, have done it safely and one hasn't. We're going to focus so much on this one that we scare the shit out of you and you don't become enlightened and you just keep going to work every day
Yeah,
and
like so.
putting charges on your credit card.
Yeah, this was like a while ago, but there was a story out of Afghanistan, Pat Tillman, so he was a celebrity because he was a football player for the Cardinals. gave up $1 million contract and joined the Airborne Rangers. And so legit badass, but the cover up of how he was killed in action, so it was friendly fire. And then how like Bush and I forget the Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld, they just, I mean, blatantly use that as a propaganda tool to get people to join. And then it's Tillman's family that is still suffering,
Yeah.
from not just having that truth put out. And it's this, I think it's the same thing with this, like we still operate off of old past like beliefs that were created through propaganda on plant medicine.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I think we can tackle that a lot. And you and I would like that, and our listeners would like that. Also,
Yeah.
I think that will probably attract a lot of listeners who want to escape the matrix, right? People who are looking how to do what you and I are doing and put together different streams of income and work from home 100% or be digital nomads, or those types of things where they're not locked into something that is not serving them anymore. And so I think talking
Yeah.
about ethical marketing and how we're doing our podcast and building it and our coaching businesses, I think that's valuable to our listener. And I'd like to have more people on, and this subject's tricky, in alignment with us on these topics.
Yes. Yeah. And there's so many people out there,
Yeah.
I mean, just like Jason Silva, I love his stuff. And
I've
he
loved it
had,
for so long. Oh my God.
oh yeah. And I saw him on, what was it on National Geographic, Origins,
Oh yeah.
yeah, oh, that was such a great freaking show too. Um, and then just to like, I don't know, but I also want to like, because you've created a place for me where I can feel normal, because I have all of this interest that spans, our ancient past to like where we're going in the distant future, like the Dyson sphere, all this stuff, so I have all these like little tidbits of information that normally, and in fact even at church, like when I talked about it, like when something from church like sparked a thought with that, people's reaction were like, whatever, that doesn't matter, and so I always felt pushed off, and you've always gracefully, even when I don't stay on point, like, all right, that's just his head doing what it's doing, like, so thank you for that, and I want to create that for whoever
Yeah.
does come on, and also for our listeners.
Yeah. And I think whatever onboarding process we choose, like whether they have to read something or answer questions, I want to say that, like, I love watching people nerd out on something. Like when their eyes light up and they get all passionate, it's so beautiful. I don't care if you're talking about a McDonald's hamburger or the Alps, like you nerd out on something and I get to witness you being alive. What a gift, right? Like that is so cool. So I would love to encourage our guests more to go out on tangents, show us what you love. That's what's cool about knowing humans.
Yeah, I mean, because when we have these epiphanies, like, I mean, epiphany is so, I think, much greater. Like learning is amazing, but like those epiphanies, like where you
Oh,
make something your own, like that's a
yeah.
singularity. And then that to me, that brings me like, that's how our universe started, a point of singularity, you
Yeah.
know? And then even my Christian mind, even if it's like, okay, like creationism, well, it started through God's voice, which is a point of singularity. So you can't
Yeah.
escape that to me. And that's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want people, whether they're joining us as a guest or even just listening, and I always want to make sure we highlight that, and I think that's why I'm so open about the way my mind works, even when it's a very insecure thing, because I'm thinking
Yeah.
like, if I'm thinking this, like other people are thinking the same.
Yeah. And imagine how powerful a world would be where everybody did that. And we were all
Yeah.
like, I'm anxious right now. Or like, you just triggered something that came up for me. And we were all just like honestly communicating with each other. That's freedom to me when I have relationships where I can do that. That's not
Yeah.
masking. It's so great. So
Yeah.
I want to provide that space where like you don't have to mask when you're on our show. Be nerdy, be weird, be whatever you are.
See, I want to try to reach out to who's Rain, is it Wilson, from
Yeah.
The Office. So
Yeah.
he has this docu-series on Peacock called The Geography of Bliss, where he goes around and he has his own podcast, and he calls people
That's cool.
like bliss heads or something. But I never felt like so connected. Like he grew up watching sitcoms and wishing that's like the love that he, and I'm like, wow, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents were great,
Yep.
but growing up in that, like, where you don't talk about emotions, you don't give emotion, you don't show like emotions are bad,
Yeah.
you know. And I felt like, and I'm so drawn to sitcoms, I think, because they make me feel so comfortable.
Yeah.
But there was a guy that he had on in Taiwan who said that Western culture um turns us into parts of a machine. We're workers. That's what we're supposed to be, almost like that bee mentality or the ant mentality. But we're not bees, we're not ants, we're human beings.
Yeah.
We're not meant to just be solely workers.
Yeah.
We're meant to be conscious.
Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe we should think about how to change our questions a little bit, or maybe make a big list
Mm.
of questions that we can ask people that help go to these spaces that we want to go to. Like, what is, they share a big thing, and then we could ask, like, okay, what does your inner critic say about this? Right.
And see, like, yeah, my mind does not work like that for whatever reason,
Yeah.
but like,
Or where are you still feeling shame about this right now? Right.
yeah,
What are you
that's
struggling
beautiful.
with? Right. Because, like you said, it's everybody who's has some piece of it, and it's okay to talk about. And so I
Yeah,
think
like,
maybe
it's like to think that Dwight Schrute, a person that has created this incredible character that will resonate throughout my lifetime,
yeah.
that will keep bringing me back, to the show, felt the same way that I do, and number one, like it resonated with me, like, oh, what I'm feeling is not wrong. It's
Yes.
normal.
Yes.
And it's not something to be ashamed of. And it doesn't mean I'm
Yes.
like pushing, like, and that's what I want our listeners like to feel. It doesn't mean I'm judging the way I grew up,
Right.
So I think that's very, very important.
Yeah. And I think you have to let go of that judgment if you're really going to do any personal development work, because investigation gets stopped by judgment. And so at some
Yeah.
point, you have to just accept things about yourself and others, because then you can really pull them out and look at them. When you're ashamed about them and hiding them in the closet of your mind or your emotions,
Yeah.
you don't know what they are, really, right? You got to take them out and look at them.
And again, I think that was a gift of the episode that we're not going to air. Like, I feel like it's like almost like Voldemort, like the episode that shall not be named, but it was that marketing strategy of, let me use your fears. And again, like, if and I'm sure you believe the same thing, like everything that we do, all of our actions are a reflection of who we are inside. And if you're using people's fears for you to gain money, then you are a very fearful person, because without that money, you lose all of your identity.
Yeah. And I think there's also room for compassion, right? You are just another
Yes.
human trying to make it in this weird ass human world. And how do we do it? And what jobs do we have? And how do we make sure our kids are fed? And I mean, being a human is friggin' hard and
Yeah.
complicated. And for some reason, I think that we want to pretend that it's not,
Yeah.
but it is. It is hard.
Yeah.
People are doing the best they can, even if they go like we said before. Like, I was sideways, way left, and my learning brought me back here. It's okay if people have ideas that are on the edges, or it's all their path. It's okay.
Yeah. Even talking about like where we want to get, like that old white man mentality, that created, like, I mean, came up with Manifest Destiny, all this stuff that
Yeah.
worked more to destroy people, and was passionate about the destruction, because God told us to do that, and there is a lot of privilege in my life, both earned and given, and unearned, that's just naturally there. and there's a part of me that then fights against that because no, but we're about understanding that we can both be privileged and have gone through a very sucky life at the same time. That's okay. We can be, I mean, life is a paradox. We can be that paradox.
Yeah.
I mean, nature itself does that. I mean, we have the physical laws of the universe, but then we also have the quantum world where all the physical laws break down. They exist at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's true. You know, we talked about confidence and the sort of fraud feeling. That's true for that, right? I can show up on this podcast or in a session professional and in my coach persona, and little 2-year-old Mindy can be there too, right? Both of them can exist. I don't have to
Yes.
wait until this scared part of me is gone, which is never going to happen, right? She can come along for the ride. And
Yeah.
that's okay. So I think that's beautiful. That's integration, right?
Yeah. And I think that it's so important because it's one of the things that I think is a massive failure um in the mental health industry to say like that part of you has just as much right. In fact, it's serving you, you
Yeah.
know, and to be able to, like you said, like our listeners to like to be able to like that are looking for a way to break out of that matrix. Like I'm out, but there is like, you know, from the movie, like I feel like all the wires and connect, they're still there, you
Yeah.
know, and they're still feeding me all this bullshit. Like, oh, you know, and again, which was sort of exemplified. If you're not, if you have a business that's not making $10,000 a month, then it's not a success. Well, if I'm defining success through my eyes, maybe true. But if I'm defining success through the one person that paid me 40 bucks instead of a $10,000 package, who's now living an incredible life, or like one of my clients, in fact, yeah, I think she paid me $40 a session, and who's now going to school to be a pilot. Like her life completely changed. So I define success through that,
Yeah.
you know, and I want all of our listeners to understand that there is another way to look at all of that stuff, like that we can break out of the matrix, but we still struggle.
Yeah. And it's a constant sort of evaluation. I know for me, you know, sometimes I have a lot of high paying clients for whatever reason. And so when someone comes to me and they can only play 40 bucks, great. Yes. Come on. Sometimes, you know, depending on the cycles of my own business, I don't have a lot of clients, which means I need to be spending a lot of time on marketing and getting my client, which means my hour is worth more than 50 and I need to charge more, right? Like there's different ways of that I think about my own charging, because as much as thinking about the other person is thinking about yourself. What do I need not to be stressed? What do I need for to reach my goals, right? And that goal can include a vacation with my husband, right? I don't have to feel guilty about that. There is I think there's a lot of people that think, you know, I'm either shit and poor or I'm rich. No, you can just
Yes.
weed the middle road and, you know, exist in that space where you're taking care of all your needs, not just your financial needs.
Yeah. Just being,
Right. Yeah.
you know, and the stuff that comes and the stuff that
Yeah.
doesn't come, that, you know,
Yeah.
just is.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, you know, this kind of thing we're talking about accepting, non-judgmental, respectful, inclusive. That is so important to me. And I don't think we ever really verbalized it between the two of us or on our show. But I know one of the things that didn't feel good to me in the episode we're not going to air was a comparison or calling out of people who are awkward socially or awkward in networking events, because that's me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm awkward and I'm going to be awkward everywhere I go. And I don't need to not be awkward in order to be successful. I'm okay just
Right.
the way I am. Right.
Yeah.
And so I know personally I felt that way. And I think that's another sort of big change that's going on in the world right now, is people accepting that people with autism or ADHD or these other things are equally valuable members to the team. In fact, we need them in their way of thinking. And so we need more integration. And I
So,
want to see
all right,
the show.
I have a story time. There was some guy like I think on TikTok, he would just go out to random people like story time, and then a lot of people would just take part in what he was saying, like he would
Yeah.
narrate. So I was infantry, and we ended up like doing this one. We were out in the field up in Germany, and we were in this tent, like we got a chance to like get warm and stuff. And an intelligence officer asked if I so he was trying to prepare a brief for like the generals and stuff where he thinks the attack is going to come from and all that. And he was like, here's like a little map like type thing. Like you tell us like what's your thoughts? And I just looked at it, I'm like, I don't know. And I just circled because it was an open field and then it had like a little bunch of like trees here and then on the side. So I'm like, I think the attack is here and with people lying in wait here so that when we come into this area, they can just close the door and then it's just, shoot fish in a barrel. I ended up being 10 meters off. So I beat all of the career West Point, intelligence officers. So having that different mindset sometimes, in fact, even NASA now,
Yeah.
I always go back to my documentaries and I'm like, yeah, see, like that's why I'm a piece of shit because I just watch documentaries and think I know stuff, but when they were putting together, I think it was the Perseverance rover that's on Mars right now, they weren't looking for engineers. They were looking for people that had the ability to deal with the stress of if you torque like a nut just a little bit or a screw just a little bit too tight, it's $1 billion mistake. They're like, you can have the most educated engineers in the country that stress will destroy them. And he said, we can train anybody, we can teach anybody to build a robot, but we can't teach people to deal with the way that their brain naturally works.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me look at my list here and see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about that I thought would be cool. Yeah, I think that was the things I want to cover about the show. So let's sit on that one question of how to handle people who are already booked.
Mhm.
And with the person that we have coming up on Friday, let's have a little conversation before the show just to kind of talk about the slow movement of our show and, see a little bit about what she was hoping to get out of it and talk about and what we want to do. And that would make me feel better going into the show.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, because even like because I was like disagreements, but allowing the space for that where it's still
Right.
respectful, you
Yeah.
know, um, on both sides. So it's not just, like having that space where people can talk about a disagreement without seeing it, because I'm not trying to destroy somebody's identity, even if I don't agree with what it's built on.
Yeah. But I think we need to get their permission first.
Yeah, because then I think that's when it becomes like you're attacking me.
Right. So if we have a little conversation beforehand that just says, hey, are you comfortable if we don't agree with something that you say, like voicing what we feel and exploring it together? Or is that not comfortable for you? Like, that's a
Yeah.
legitimate question for a guest. And then they can decide. And then we can say, like, we really like going deep with our guests. Some of the kind of questions we want to ask you is about like your inner critic and where you struggle. Are you comfortable with us asking you those questions? And kind of get their permission and buy-in before we hit record, because I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, something came out of left field and they weren't expecting it and they don't know how to answer, right? Like, I want to engage with them in a respectful manner.
Right. Yeah. It's not like the journalism, you know what I mean? Like the
Right. I
water,
don't want to catch anybody off guard.
yeah, yeah. It's experiencing humanity.
Or maybe I'll send her an email like tonight and say like, hey, getting ready for your show, like here's your Zoom link, like here's some things we were thinking about, and that way she has time to digest it and give us her answers. I can say, email me back or tell us when you log in for the show how you feel about these things.
Yeah, especially now that you're like, because you could tell like you're in that focused, very
Yeah.
clear mindset. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
And because this whole process, and this is why I'm grateful for the episode that shall not be named. Um, it it made me like you said, it gave me the give because I started questioning like, all right, do I use I'm a stoner spirited life coach? Like, or
Yeah.
because even the work that we're doing outside of this, on you teaching me how to run a business, it's one of the speed bumps that I've had was in the description.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, all right, I'm gonna put on Google and Yahoo and Bing that I'm a stoner spirited life coach, and no one is gonna take me serious. But that's my judgment. That's my judgment that I'm putting out there and just saying this is the way. And maybe so. Maybe that will only bring me in clients that aren't going to be paying $5,000 for a package, but those are my people. Like that's who I am. I was that person.
And this is
This has helped me
your
see.
path, right? So you
Yes.
need to go in the direction that your feelings are telling you to go, because that's how you're going to learn what's next, what's next, what's next. If you do my path, even if you got there, you wouldn't be able to do it because you didn't learn the things you needed to, right? Like each of us has an
Yeah.
individual path that we have to take. And that's why like self-investigation is so important, is discovering what that is. What is your individual
Yeah.
path? Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Cause I was just thinking like all of these conversations, like I wish, and I don't know, maybe there's a way to do it, but just saying screw it to the editing and clips and stuff, but just putting these conversations out because then that's one of my big worries all the time is, with all the conversations that I think should be put out, that would become my business,
Right.
like
Yeah.
there would never be any of the moving forward in my classes or the other ideas that I have.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that you're speaking to a really important part of entrepreneurship, and an even more important part to partnership is switching around the workload all the time, trying different things, right? Like, okay, well, maybe you just put the videos out and I do all the social media, or maybe you go out and try to get people and I do the back end stuff and editing, but making sure that that's a live conversation between us so that we're figuring out what's optimal for us as we're working together. We don't know, right? We just got to try stuff until we're like, okay, this is working.
Yeah, and to be completely open, just even for the anybody that's still listening, like that is one of my biggest fears that I'm failing you. So you put up some stuff from Chris and I was like, oh man, like yesterday I was beating and ironically yesterday was the first time I felt anxiety and so funny it was after I realized this.
Yeah.
Um was I forgot to put up a clip of Pat. And I'm like, see, I'm failing, so it's almost like I'm waiting for like the all right, you're not the person I'm looking for
Yeah.
email or message from you, instead of talking about this stuff. Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
I think that this is like a really good conversation about everybody doesn't have the same kind of intelligence and the same gifts, right? So, how do I say this? Um, what you bring to the table in the space that you hold, the investigation, that is more valuable than getting any videos up. Like for me, I'm like, I don't care. You got them up, you didn't get them up, whatever. Like we're doing this, right? Because that's not where you're providing value to me. Like I can do that by myself if I really care about it, right? But if you stopped showing up from an investigative place, if you started having judgments or your curiosity discontinued, right? Like these are the things I value about you as a partner and that you're bringing to the table. And I think sometimes those kinds of things, and especially in our world, just get undervalued or they don't get talked about, right? And so I think yeah, everybody is different. I was just thinking about this because my sister and I hold very different types of intelligence. I have a very like problem solving brain. I can fix anything, I can figure out how to do it. But when it comes to building personal relationships, I don't know what the F to do. Like, I was down visiting my sister in San Diego, And we go to the preschool where her daughter is, and she's like, oh, hi, I'm talking to this mom and that mom and setting up play dates. And it's all so natural feeling. And I'm in awe because I was never able to do that as a mom. I can't do that today. I don't have the same sort of social intelligence that she has. And she doesn't have the sort of problem solving intelligence that I have. That's fine, right? Like, it doesn't mean anything about you if you are weak in one area and strong in one area. You just find people where the plug matches, right?
Yeah.
And so if you
It's
were
so
strong in
because
the same areas I was, this wouldn't really be a good partnership because we're balancing each other out, right?
yeah, and it's so funny because I judge myself like when you sent the brain dump, and I was like, oh my God, I am not doing enough. And then when you said like, all right, here's all like the social media things, like all these things, you don't have to use them, but so I judge myself not on who I am, but on who I'm not.
Yes.
Instead of accepting, well, this is who I am and I suck at this stuff. I am so routine oriented. Like routine could be great, but it also could be very limiting. And then as you were saying that too, like, and that's just the way my brain works. Like like in the vacuum of space, the shape that forms naturally is a sphere. But society puts us in a box. We're not meant to be in a box. We're meant to be like spherical, like it has no edges,
Yeah.
um yeah.
Yeah. So I'll share a big truth bomb about myself with this. So for me, my whole life, I have been assertive, loud, taking up big space, high energy, does more than everybody else. Just because I have this abundance of energy, I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad, right? And I feel like I've been pushed back. So it's like,
Mm.
don't be so big, Mindy, or oh, like, why are you taking the leadership role again? Or let other people have a space, or you're making people feel bad with how much you're doing, or right, that sort of like shrinking. And I was talking to a girlfriend about this struggle, and she said something that really resonated with me. She said, look, Mindy, she goes, you're a Hummer. You are not a Carmen Gia. You are not a Volkswagen Bug. And you keep trying to be a little like Volkswagen Bug energetically because you think it's cute and what's going to get you success. But you need to be okay with being a Hummer. And as soon as you're okay with being a Hummer, you'll be successful. And I just like started crying because I felt so seen. Like, my energy is big, it bowls people over, but I cannot learn how to mold that energy by keeping it small. I have to let it out, and then I have to figure it out and say I'm sorry if I hurt people. And uh that's where I'm at, like what I'm learning big time right now.
Yeah, and I love the fact that because that just blew my mind. And as you were saying that, like you felt the need to always be like restrained. And one of the who I am at my core was I'm always like Sandy used to always make fun of me like I meander or I putz, you know. Even in high school, remember like we're going to the mall, like that's what you would do,
Hanging
like
out
on
at the
Friday
mall.
night, just walk around the yeah, we were the original mall walkers. Um and we like everybody like hated going with me because I walk so slow. Especially then in the military, everything is like, if you have an objective, you hit it, full force, full blast. And that was never me. I'm the person that's always, but I've always felt the need to speed up. I've always felt pulled. So
Yes.
I take on the acting, I take, like the whole fake it till you make it type mentality, which I hate because I felt like I've had to live my life that way. And it's hard, especially with a business where like anything you look at business, if you're not up at 4 a.m. and reading 18 books and meditating for 300 hours, like then you suck.
Yep.
I'm like, you know what? In my business, like a day of fighting my anxiety, and then moving forward little bits, that's okay.
Yep.
And I see you get like emotional with it. And I was like tearing up a little bit too, because I'm like, yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah. And it is a gift. And, this is interesting. Like, often in business, I attract people like you, and my husband is like you. So my soul must, at some level, deeply understand or desire to slow down, to putz, or to have that evened out. So maybe I can go way out here and branch and be my bulldozer, and they're rooting, right? But like those kinds of partnerships serve me. And in my marriage, I deal with it. And oftentimes people say, like, well, don't you feel resentful because you do so much more than your husband? Like, I've been to your house and like you're doing all the dishes, you're doing this. And I'm like, no, like he's slower, he moves slow. Why would I hate him for that? I have the energy. I'm not going
Yeah.
to do it if I don't want to do it. Right. And so it helps. Right. And he offers me like a depth of being and thinking. I would be floating away energetically without my husband, I feel like. Right. So it matters, right? Like both sides matter what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah. And it's so funny that you mentioned it, because I never looked at it like that, but that's Sandy is you. Like, she is that high energy, always moving. And I heard one of the things, like in the coaching classes that I took, like we're attracted to the attributes in other people that we sort of envy, that we wish we had.
Yeah.
And she was always had this playful, and even today, you know, like when I go outside, I'm always thinking like, what are my neighbors thinking? Because like I swear my neighbors think that Sandy's my nurse, like live-in nurse. Um, but she's outside, and our dog has like some special, like has some like hip mobility issues, but we weren't supposed to get her past 3, but she's now 6, and it's because of the way Sandy has dealt with her. And Sandy's out there like in the snow on a leash, because we can't let her just run free or she'll hurt herself, playing with this dog without a care in the world or a thought to what are other people going to be thinking. And I become so envious of that.
Yep.
So if it wasn't her in my life, like I think I would be living in a trash heap, because that stuff is just like, I don't care what the outside of my house looks like. And I don't, and I always judge myself for that.
Yes.
Like, oh, I have to care of the curb appeal.
Mhm. Right.
But
And if you
that,
want to care, you can, but there's no requirement that that has to be something you care about.
yeah, when I see it, I'm like, oh, that's beautiful, but like, that's just not the way my brain works.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Mhm. I know my husband, every time we go out to dinner or go to a dinner party, he tucks his napkin into his shirt and makes it into a bib. The biggest nerd move you've ever seen. And he has like a gut and stuff, and he just like rocks it. And that was one of the things that made me fall in love with him, because
I
I'm like,
love that.
you don't give a shit enough to just bib yourself every time we go out to eat. You know how much fun we can have playing together if you're not that self-conscious? Like you can, like you said, you can pull me into play in a way that I've never played in the world before, because I'm doing everything right. A plus B, blah, blah, blah. Right. But he has a spirit of play, and it has changed my life.
Dude,
I'm not.
I remember, yeah, in high school, I would not eat with my girlfriend because I judged the way I ate. So like, because like even in high school, I was like, because like the whole the spectrum that I'm on, like you can't have a sandwich without Doritos on it. Like this just doesn't work. Like it's against the laws of nature. And so the fact that he's like, I'm here to eat and have a good time. I'm gonna get messy. I don't give a shit. So like, but I judge myself like, okay, I gotta eat over the plate, make sure like nothing falls. It's like that is just amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
Just build up, man.
Yeah, I did too, right? And he inspires me all the time to just be my goddamn self. Like that's all each of us can
Yeah.
only be, right? We can't be anything other than who we are. So just show up.
And I think that's what we do. We spend so much time trying to define our creases and like in our shape, like instead of just sanding down those edges. We try to define the edges instead of just getting rid of them and just accepting each other for who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like instead of me trying to define me, it's almost like I'm gonna just show up and life is naturally going to like carve certain edges out and like help me become me. But I have to kind of get out of the way of the process, because if I'm thinking about who I want to be, then I'm not letting in like the real life that can really turn me into the person I was born to be.
Yeah. So again,
A
the way my head
surrender.
is, this is like, I think this is like beautifully just shows the way our brains work. Cause you're 100% right. Like I never knew this until I like was in community college and I learned about oxbow lakes. I've never heard of an oxbow lake before.
I don't know what that
So
is.
you ever look at a river and you see like where it turns, right? And then there'll be like over time it'll clear so much sediment that it creates like this U-turn in it. But because the way that the water goes, it turns this way, then it turns this way. Eventually, with erosion, it'll cut off access to that thing. So they call it an oxbow. And now you'll have this little circular lake that's just independent of the river it once was.
Right.
And that's exactly what you're talking about, like allowing. And it's so cool because every time I'm on this medicine, it always goes back to the same thing for me, flow,
Mhm.
you know? And it goes like, just be like water. Like, I mean, Bruce Lee, like everybody likes to say, because Bruce Lee is just so badass and stuff, but you take all that away. No, it's so true. Just flowing like in the water of life, like just allowing it to take you where it's going to go and shape you.
Yeah, there's a song that I love. So I really like lo-fi music. It's like low frequency music, like beats. And there's a song with that quote in the beginning of it. I'll put it in the show notes and I'll text it to you because I love it. Every time it comes on, I'm like, "Ooh, this Bruce Lee quote."
Yeah, yeah, dude.
It's
I even
kind of like
forgot we
put to
were recording.
music.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So okay, well, I feel really good. I think that we came to a good place, like for moving forward. And I think this was a good episode. I'm glad we did the second half for other people who are investigating, how to gain clarity on their business and stuff. So it's nice.
Yeah. And I was even thinking like with this, I mean, we could either put it up as a whole thing or put it up as two separate ones and just not really give a shit about like the editing. And,
Yeah.
I'm sure I said stupid things that I should have said or whatever, but fuck it, it's gonna happen, I don't mean any harm by it. But
Yeah. And I think if that kind of thing happens and there's comments or, people, then you engage in dialogue about it. Like we always talk about on TikTok, right? Yeah. Because you know what?
yeah,
We step up in life too. And what do we have to do? We have to go clean up our messes and talk about it. So we can do that publicly if
yeah,
necessary, right? Like that's part of the human experience.
yeah, yeah. That was beautiful. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
this was
cool.
pretty cool.
Stop recording. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Chasing Thoughts podcast. Please support us by liking, subscribing, or leaving a review or comment. We would really appreciate it. If you'd like to be a guest, we would love to explore life and what it means to be human with you. Please email us at chasingthoughtspodcast@gmail.com.